the show, and this is how I would have games at the show. So I need to email the printer and let them know, okay, this might be a possibility. But if there's the choice between like me having those games on time for the convention or waiting for them to dry at the plant, I'm waiting for them to dry at the plant.
Yeah.
If I have to go to the convention empty-handed, I would rather do that than get the games early. So drying at the plant, this is another thing people may not be aware of. So after the game gets printed, I'm printing in China. China has a very humid atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
So
got nothing to do with all the smog that holds everything in, but
so no, it's just
yeah,
naturally
it's, right.
very humid place. So that means if they print the game, stick it in a pallet, send it off. People open up the boards. You've seen this before. The boards are all warped.
Well, remember even worse. Remember Duel in the Dark back in the day when they had mold. Yeah, they had actual mold growing on the boards, and I think the former Valley Games had a game. Was it Titan? That was
possible.
Packaged, and the boards weren't dry, so everything smeared.
Yep, the first Tasty Minstrel games had that problem also.
Did they really?
Yeah. They had mold in Terra Prime, and Homesteaders had a collation problem. Talk about a company that has blazed a trail, learned a lot of stuff the hard way, and now they're really amazing. Like what TMG does now. Like Scoville is an amazing game. Steamworks is really, really good. Harbor is a fantastic little game in a tiny box.
So now you're convincing me that I should take Harbor off my list of shame and play it.
Oh, absolutely. Harbor's phenomenal.
I've had it for like a year, and it's sitting here, Gil. It's sitting here, and it's mocking me, and I even printed player aids, and every time I go over to the shelf, I'm like, what should we play? And Harbor's like, pick me, and I'm like, eh.
It's like half an hour. It's half an hour of time investment, and it's such a juicy game. It's really fantastic. So I'm offering this not as a way of like criticizing Tasty Minstrel, but showing like this is an example of a company that started taking its hard knocks, taking its lessons, and now they're extremely successful. And I think they're doing an amazing job.
Oh, they are.
Like they're very, 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 very good. But okay, back to the mold. So let's say
I love this conversation, buddy. We're all over the place. This is great.
So let's say I print these games at the plant, and then I just tell them, okay, just ship them. Don't worry about drying them. Someone opens them up. At worst, it's moldy. But if it's not moldy, like the boards will all be warped.
Yep.
And the Networks has these long vertical boards. So I need to make sure that everybody's on the same page and say, look, if we need to dry these games, drying takes precedence. So what the printing company actually do is they have an area that's just a giant humidor, or like a dehumidor, as it were, just a less humid space, and they put the games there, and the games just sit there for like for like a week or two, and the idea is just to get them in a different atmosphere. So then they'll get packed in the pallets from there, and then once they're open, they've already been acclimated. That's the acclimatization process, I think it's called.
Okay.
And they get acclimated to a less humid atmosphere, which is pretty much just anything that isn't China. And that's what you really have to do. So there's all these things that go into a quality game. So let me mention one other thing about being a publisher, and this isn't a gripe. This is just a warning to people who are thinking about being publishers.
Don't do it. No.
I'm not going to say don't do it, because I'm doing it. It's the best thing I've ever done. It's really hard, but I'm really, really happy with what's going on. But I will warn this. So the Networks has 200 art assets. There's 200 cards. A lot of the cards have 4 pieces of information on it. So we're looking at maybe 1,500 to 2,000 things in the game that I can mess up. There's so many things that I can mess up in the game. Now, let's say of those 1,500 things, let's say I mess up one. So my record is 1,499 and 1.
Mm-hmm.
So depending on what that one is, that one defines the game.
It does. You're right.
When people talk about the game, they talk about that one mistake that you made. Now, granted, so I've already seen a mistake I made in the Networks, and it's at the printer. It's one of the cards, like there's bonus cards. One card has a very minor misspelling. So,
It's
I
going to
think,
drive you bananas every time you see it,
every
isn't it?
time I see it, it's going to drive me
Uh-huh.
nuts. It's the kind of thing easily fixed in a second edition and does not change gameplay one whit.
Sure.
But seeing
No,
that
right.
one misspelling is and a lot of people, they'll look at that and they, if only I had seen it, I would have fixed it, I would have caught it. And well, yeah, maybe, but I've had people offer to proofread my games. But the thing is, you can be an external person and proofread. That doesn't mean you're going to catch everything.
No.
I mean, um, I can probably catch most things, but I can't catch everything. So, I have people looking at everything, and this card went through testers. This card went through proofreaders. People look through it, and we didn't pay them enough. You didn't get the right proofreader. So no, people are human. That's what it comes down
Right.
to. These aren't the kinds of things that you only notice if you're paying attention. These are the kinds of things that you will stare through the 150th time you look at them. This is so. Again, I'm not saying that this is a good thing. I'm not saying that all games that games should look worse. I think the high bar for quality is a good thing for consumers.
For sure.
But at the same time, I want to set people's expectations and make sure they understand that when you see like a misspelling in a game, it's not due to carelessness. I've seen like somebody takes a game with really great graphic design, I think, and then something's not exactly to their taste, and they say, "Oh, this is poor graphic design."
Right.
No, it's not poor graphic design. It may not be to your taste, but
Exactly.
look how this lines up. This is good graphic design. It just may not be to your taste, but you're the first person I hear. And again, this is not my game that I'm like, for example, Xenon Profiteer, which I think has incredible graphic design. That's a phenomenal looking game. I think Daniel Solis did that one.
He did.
And he's the cream of the crop when it comes to graphic design, and no slouch when it comes to designing himself. But somebody was, I was telling them how the pipelines work in the game, and it didn't click for them in 0.5 seconds, so they said it was poor graphic design, and they understood it in 0.75 seconds.
Right.
So to them it was poor graphic design. I mean, that's just an indication of how high the bar is. So if you find yourself saying that a lot as a gamer, I will invite you to take a step back and look at it from all the other things. And again, I'm not saying that because I think you should accept a lower standard of quality. I'm saying that because these things are not trivial, or maybe they're not as trivial as a lot of gamers seem to think they are. This is not the kind of thing that you only catch if you're paying attention. This is the kind of thing that it's incredible how many things can slip through if you're not careful. Now, that said, look, I've seen games that did not get the testing they need. I think one thing I see games that get published, like the graphic designer sends in their files and the publisher says, "Okay, that's good," and then the game comes out.
Right.
And I'm a believer, you have to test the graphic design. Just like you're testing the game.
Oh, sure.
You've got to test the graphic design.
Well,
the
it's part of
networks
it.
went through a ton. Yeah, but you'll be surprised how many publishers say, "Oh, that's good." They look at the graphic design, they see it on their computers, and they say, "Okay, that's fine." So if you see some graphic design WTFs, a lot of times publishers don't test the graphic designs.
Right.
And the networks, I did a ton of graphic design testing where I said, this icon is confusing people, this thing is confusing people. And I think one of the reasons the game plays so smoothly is because we took the time to test the graphic design. We took the time and money to go back, because that's more money. It's more expensive.
For sure.
A lot of publishers, they're not doing it because they're mean. They're not doing it because they're stupid. They're doing it because, number one, they need the game out by a certain deadline.
Right.
And number two, every time they tell the graphic designer to go back and redo something, that costs money. And a lot of publishers don't have money. This is not a decision they're making lightly. This is a decision they're making because they just can't afford it.
Right.
This is a really hard business. And it's one of the reasons why, as I mentioned my cash flow, I need to pay attention to my cash flow. I pay a lot of attention to the quality of my games, and that means I have to make that much more money in order to justify what I'm doing, So this is the other side of it. You look at, so do you know Planet Steam, the game Planet Steam?
I do. I haven't played it, but I'm familiar with it.
Do you know the first edition of Planet Steam, the ridiculous looking one?
That was the huge box one, right?
Oh yeah, I own it. I am proud to own it. It is absolutely phenomenal game, and you can tell a lot of love and sweat went into that game. Both the design and the production. The production is just gorgeous. I believe that is the only game that publisher ever made.
Yeah, yeah, they were.
They went out of business.
Yep.
Because they could not afford it.
The game was like $120, wasn't it?
Yeah, because that's how. I mean, and here's another thing. I hear people complaining about like Splatter games, for example. Why is Food Chain Magnet $100?
I want Food Chain Magnet so bad, Gil.
Yeah. It's a fascinating game. It's a totally like all Splatter games. Their games are all totally fascinating. I find Food Chain Magnet wound a little too tight for my tastes. I like my games to reward play and experimentation just a little bit more.
Right.
And Food Chain Magnet, like if you don't, you can be out in the first round if you don't play it. And that's Splatter's philosophy. Splatter believes very heavily in games that they want games that are challenging and that you take a few plays to replay. And I mean, their audience loves it. And so that's an example. They understand their audience. They understand the engagement that they want. They understand the experience that they're making for their players. So they're absolutely 100% doing the right thing. I don't think that it's a worse game because of it. It's just not so much to my taste. Now, Great Zimbabwe. I love Great Zimbabwe. I need to get on that pre-order because that is a great game. But back to Splatter. So people like people think a lot from the thing that I'm hearing from all the chatter, a lot of people think Splatter can just drop their prices and there's no problem, right? Because they're charging $100. Other games are $50. Therefore, Splatter can drop their prices to $50. Mm-hmm. So there's a few things that go into setting the price for a game, and a lot of it is what people will pay, and sure, people will pay $100 for Food Chain Magnet. Therefore, that's a realistic price for it. But there's another element to it, and that's the quantity of your print run, mm-hmm. and therefore your unit cost and your landing cost.
Economy of scale, man. That's what it's all about.
Absolutely. Yeah, Splatter makes games in relatively small print runs.
Yeah.
And that's why they're so expensive, especially so the reason why they another thing about their philosophy, this ties right back into their philosophy. Their games are not for everyone, so they can only print about 1,000 at a time. Like they'll print 1,000 copies of their games. But when you print 1,000 copies of their game, your unit cost for a game like Food Chain Magnet, they're probably paying $25 a game.
Right.
And that's just how it is. That's the economics of making a game. So I don't know if you read Randy Hoyt's article on this, but it's a long-held maxim that your MSRP should be roughly, as a rule of thumb, 5 times the cost of your landing price.
Mm-hmm.
Your landing price is the cost it is to make one game plus the cost it is to ship that game to your warehouse.
Right.
So if for Splatter, the unit cost or the landing cost is $25, they have to sell it for $125. Anything less, and sure, they might make some money on the game, but they won't make enough money to afford a reprint, And
right.
a mature company like Splatter should be able to do that. They've got enough products that they have enough of a cash flow built up. Formal Ferret, I can do that as well, but I've got so many other things that I'm spending money on, and I don't have the mature product line yet. I don't constantly have games in stock. So, I still have to lean a little bit on Kickstarter, lean a lot bit on Kickstarter until, it may be in 3 or 4 years I can start to afford reprints out of my own pocket. Maybe more like 1 to 2 years I can do reprints out of my own pocket. And then maybe in 3 to 5 years I can start moving off of Kickstarter. Who knows? I know it's taken Tasty Minstrel, 7 years, 5 to 7 years, but they're finally at the point now where they don't need to fund every game on Kickstarter. They have a bunch of games now that they're releasing, mm-hmm. not on Kickstarter. They're because with Kickstarter, you generally only can have one project on Kickstarter at a time.
Unless you're Queen Games, who right now has several.
Yeah, and that's again that gets into a larger discussion of why is Queen Games on Kickstarter.
We'll keep this on the up and up, right? We'll be happy about things.
Well, yeah, I just because that's a whole different ball of wax.
That is a whole different ball of wax.
Yeah, but I mean, you also see companies. There's also companies who finish one Kickstarter. And when the campaign ends, they immediately open another. And some companies have to do that because the way they're planning out their year, it's just they need that cash flow.
Right.
And hopefully those companies that are doing that, in a few years, they won't need Kickstarter anymore. I mean, I love Kickstarter. I've gotten a lot of great feedback for my games on Kickstarter. I've said